The twin sons of Arkans reached scorched the dunes with relentless fury, casting rippling waves of heat across the barren plateau where Darien Holt had built his exile. His outpost, once a mobile command station, now rusting into the sand, groaned with expanding metal as he bolted shut the maintenance hatch on the water recycler. "Another glorious fucking day," Darien muttered, dragging his forearm across his sweat-lined brow. He tossed the wrench into a crate and leaned against the blistering side of the trailer, his bare chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. 15 years in the colonial vanguard had hardened him into something not quite human anymore. His frame still bore the rugged strength of a battlefield commander, but the quiet out here had etched deeper lines into his face than any campaign ever had. Silver dust clung to his boots, to his short-cropped dark hair, and to the creases of his worn trousers. He took a long pull from his canteen, the water lukewarm but welcome. There were no neighbors. No towns. Just sand, silence, and solitude, a calculated choice. After he cashed out his pension, Darien hadn't looked back. The nearest outpost was 80 kilometers northeast, and the terrain between was murder on foot. He liked it that way. Inside the station, he kept everything functional but minimal. One bunk. A collapsible kitchenette. A defense console that hadn't seen use in months. He lived simply, grow what he could under the UV canopy, ration the rest, keep the sensors calibrated. Routine was survival. As the smaller sun dipped behind the red cliffs to the west, Darien prepped a bland nutrient paste. Then came a sound that shattered his routine. A soft, rapid scratching at the outer door. He froze. Nothing ever came here. Not unless it wanted to kill him. Darien moved like a ghost through the dim interior, his footsteps silent on the metal plating. His hand dropped to the sidearm holstered at his hip, a plasma stubber, old but reliable, and he approached the security panel with calm, practiced precision. The scratching came again, more insistent this time. He activated the external camera. A flicker. Then the grainy feed stabilized. Standing just outside his airlock was a small figure, humanoid in shape, covered in a thin coat of violet-blue fur with soft speckling across its limbs. It barely came up to his waist and looked utterly emaciated, ribs visible even through its fur. Its eyes were massive and reflective, violet with slit pupils that glinted in the low light. A child. Or something close. It stood swaying, barely able to hold itself upright. Darien cursed under his breath. "What the hell are you doing way out here, kid?" It looked directly at the camera, blinking slowly, then lifted a trembling hand and tapped the airlock again with a claw-tipped finger. Darien's military instincts screamed trap. Out here, even a child could be bait. Slavers, raiders, poachers, hell, half the local species were known to mimic weakness to draw in prey. But the way the kid leaned against the doorframe, panting softly, ears flat and limbs shaking, it felt real. Too real. He hesitated 1 second longer. Then he disabled the external lock. With a hiss, the airlock opened, revealing the child fully in the corridor light. It stumbled inside, blinking rapidly as it adjusted to the cooler air. Its legs gave out and it collapsed to its knees, panting in short rasps. Darien didn't lower his weapon, but he didn't raise it either. "You understand me?" The child looked up. Said nothing. But its gaze locked on the small table behind Darien where a ration tin sat steaming faintly. Darien exhaled slowly. "Yeah. Thought so." He moved cautiously to the food shelf, scooped out a protein slab, and grabbed a small bowl of cooled paste from the prep drawer. The kid didn't move, but its eyes tracked every motion. He set the bowl on the floor and stepped back. "Eat. But no sudden moves, got it?" The child sniffed the food, then began to eat slowly, reverently, like it was unsure the meal was real. Its small claws were nimble, picking pieces apart delicately. Darien watched in silence, something old and half-dead stirring inside him. Compassion. The child ate in silence, glancing up between bites as if expecting the food to vanish or be taken away. It didn't speak, not even a chirp or whistle, but Darien noted the intelligence behind those large violet eyes. Once the bowl was empty, it sat back on its haunches, licking residue from its fingers before lowering its gaze in what looked eerily like a bow. "All right, mystery kid," Darien said, crouching nearby. "You got a name?" No response. "Where'd you come from?" Still nothing. But when he mimed walking with 2 fingers and then pointed out the window, the child suddenly perked up. It stood, wobbling slightly, and walked over to the nearest console. Darien stepped aside, letting it climb onto the low crate beside the panel. The child pressed one of its claws to the screen, smearing a trail, and then pointed to a topographic map on the far left quadrant. A jagged ridge. About 20 kilometers east. "You came from there?" Darien asked. A nod. Then the child mimed 2 hands closing around wrists. "Cages. Prison." Darien's expression hardened. He reached for his translator, a small box he hadn't used in months, and powered it on. It hummed to life with a blinking blue indicator. He held it toward the child. "Try speaking now." The child opened its mouth, letting out a series of melodic chirps, hisses, and tongue clicks. The translator stuttered before outputting a single, fragmented sentence. "Mother, taken, bad ones, cage, help!" Darien's gut clenched. This wasn't a stray. This was a rescue mission. "Shit!" He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting to the ridge on the map. He knew that terrain. A perfect spot to hide a ship. And if this kid's mother was still alive, time was running out. "You're telling me your mom's being held out there?" Another nod. This one desperate. "And you crossed 20 clicks of desert alone?" A third nod. Darien sighed, standing. "You're insane. Brave but insane." He moved to the weapons locker, flipping the latch and revealing a neatly organized row of old colonial gear. His fingers hovered over his old pulse rifle. He hadn't touched it in a year. Behind him, the child watched in silence, hope shining in those massive eyes. Darien finally grabbed the rifle. "All right, kid," he muttered. "Let's go find your mom." Darien's mind slipped effortlessly back into mission prep mode. His body might have grown softer around the edges since leaving the vanguard, but the training never left. He moved fast, checking the charge on his rifle, stowing 2 thermal grenades, extra mags, med gel, and his worn-out desert cloak. "Grab some water," he told the kid, then paused. "Wait, do you even—" The child had already gone to the purifier and filled a flask from the spout. Darien raised an eyebrow. "Smart." Next came the desert crawler, an old 6-wheeled scout rover covered in solar film, silent and fast. He loaded up, placing the kid, small and light, on the bench seat beside him, strapping them in securely. "I don't even know your name," Darien said as the crawler rumbled to life. The translator buzzed. "Eli." "All right, Eli. I'm Darien." The child repeated it quietly. "Darien." They set off, the suns beginning their descent as sand whipped past in long trails behind them. As they traveled, Eli seemed more alert, scanning the dunes, occasionally pointing toward rusted wrecks of old drones or animal carcasses half buried in the sand. "You know the terrain well," Darien said, glancing over. Eli nodded, then pointed to his chest. "Fiend. Nomads. We move." The translator hiccuped, but Darien got the gist. "You've been surviving out here a long time, haven't you?" Eli didn't answer, but his posture said enough. By twilight they reached the base of the ridge. Jagged black stone rose sharply from the sand like teeth, casting long shadows under the fading sky. Darien killed the engine and peered through a scope. Near the top of the plateau sat a medium-class hauler. Sleek, silver, and covered in dust. Not old, not damaged. Operational. A landing ramp extended to a plateau ledge. 2 tall figures patrolled near the entrance, their outlines unmistakable. "Reptilian. Goddamn Syrixians," Darien muttered. "Slavers. Flesh dealers. The worst kind." He turned to Eli. "How many more inside?" Eli held up 3 fingers. Then tapped his throat. "Mother sedated. Cage near back. Darien checked the ridge for paths and blind spots. He could approach from the east under the rocks, if he kept low and timed the patrols. All right, he said. You stay here and wait. I'll bring her out. Eli growled softly, eyes narrowing. I help. I know ship. Sabotage comms. Darien hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep the kid away from the crossfire. But if the comms stayed up, they'd call backup. He stared at Eli, then finally nodded. Okay. You sneak inside from below. Hit the relay. Then get out. Understand? Eli nodded once, fierce and unafraid. Let's go save your mother. The shadows deepened as night fell over the ridge, turning the rocky formations into black spires against the pale red sky. Darien and Eli crept forward, keeping to the uneven terrain and boulders. The desert wind had calmed, and the silence felt loud in his ears. Darien led them around the eastern face of the ridge, where the patrols didn't sweep. He pointed to a vent system running along the underside of the hauler. There, he whispered. Maintenance shaft. You'll get in through that. Hit the comms relay by the engine room. Disable external transmission first. Eli nodded sharply, eyes narrowed with focus. Then, with startling agility, the small alien darted up the rock face and vanished beneath the ship's frame. Darien waited just long enough to confirm Eli wasn't spotted, then moved up the opposite side, crawling on his stomach to a plateau overlook that gave him a view of the cargo bay doors. 2 guards stood lazily near the ramp, their posture relaxed, overconfident. They wore makeshift armor woven with bone and cloth, standard for low-tier Syrixian mercs. Darien raised his rifle. His finger hovered over the trigger. Not yet. 10 minutes passed. Then, suddenly, the ship's running lights dimmed. A moment later, the external comms antenna sparked with a pop and fizzled out. Darien grinned. Nice job, kid. He took the opportunity. 1 quick squeeze, 2 clean shots. The guards dropped before they realized they were under attack. Darien sprinted to the loading ramp, keeping low. Once inside, he ducked behind a stack of crates and checked his bearings. The cargo bay was dimly lit now, the emergency power kicking in. A few cages lined the far wall, 3 occupied. In the largest one, barely visible through the bars, lay a tall female fiend. Her fur was a rich indigo with silver streaks, her form slender but muscular, even curled in an unnatural sleeping position. A sedative tube ran from her neck to a control box on the cage's base. Darien approached, eyes scanning the area. No hostiles in sight. He knelt beside the cage and worked quickly to override the locking mechanism. The ancient security code pad resisted at first, but gave way under his deft touch. The door popped open with a low click. Hey, he whispered, gently touching her shoulder. Can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, slitted pupils dilated. Wah, she murmured, her voice groggy but melodic. I'm Darien. Your son sent me. Her lips parted in shock. Then she tried to sit up and nearly fell forward. Easy. The sedative's still in your system. The purr began, soft, involuntary, as she slumped against him. Her warmth seeped into his chest, and he caught her easily in his arms. You're safe now, he said. I've got you. Darien lifted the fiend woman into a carry hold, adjusting her weight carefully. She was light, too light. Malnourished, sedated, but alive. Her fur, soft and warm against his arm, shifted slightly with each shallow breath she took. We're almost out, he whispered. Just hang on. He moved back toward the bay doors, but as he neared the exit, a guttural hiss echoed from the corridor behind him. He froze. Too late. 3 Syrixians emerged, weapons drawn, sleek-spined rifles held in clawed hands. Back away from the merchandise. One snarled, his voice thick with malice. Darien's grip tightened on the pulse rifle. Not gonna happen. They raised their weapons. Darien dove sideways behind a crate, one hand still cradling the unconscious fiend, the other snapping off 2 rounds from his rifle. One Syrixian dropped, his neck scorched open. The other two fired back, green bolts of plasma scorching the walls. Darien rolled, placing the woman gently behind a bulkhead before rising into a crouch and laying down, suppressing fire. He struck the second Syrixian in the leg, sending the alien crashing into a support beam, and turned his weapon on the last. But just as he prepared to fire, a side panel burst open. Eli shot out of the maintenance duct like a bullet, landing squarely on the third Syrixian's back. The child unleashed a savage snarl and jabbed a plasma cutter into the alien's neck. Sparks exploded as flesh met metal. The Syrixian screamed, flailed, and collapsed. Darien stared in shock as Eli hopped off the corpse, panting. "You okay?" Darien asked. Eli nodded once, then pointed behind them. "More coming. Figures." Darien grabbed the woman, still barely conscious, and slung her over his shoulder again. "Time to vanish." They tore down the ramp into the night, wind whipping at their faces. The Syrixians behind them howled, shots streaking overhead and exploding in the sand. The crawler waited at the base of the ridge. Darien sprinted, dodging plasma bursts and ducking low as the ship's engines sputtered violently, sabotaged and faltering. Eli dove into the passenger seat. Darien followed, placing the woman between them, shielding her with his body as he hit the ignition. The crawler roared to life and surged into motion. Behind them, the ship erupted in a small internal fire, the engines spewing smoke. The Syrixians screamed, grounded and furious. Darien didn't look back. "You did good, Eli," he said over the rush of wind. The child didn't reply. But the way his little hand rested protectively on his mother's arm said everything. The crawler cut across the sand like a blade through silk, its solar-charged engine humming with quiet urgency. Darien kept one hand on the steering yoke, the other resting on the pulse rifle across his lap. The night was crisp, stars glittering above in a dome of pale indigo light, but he barely noticed. He kept glancing at the fiend woman slumped in the passenger seat, her head nestled gently against Eli's shoulder. She was breathing more evenly now, her body no longer limp but still weak. Occasionally her ears twitched, her tail shifting slowly as whatever sedative the slavers had used burned through her system. Eli sat rigid beside her, one hand clinging to his mother's and the other on the console, as if he could will her back to consciousness through proximity alone. "We're almost there," Darien said quietly. The outpost appeared over the next ridge, bathed in soft security light. The station's angular silhouette gleamed faintly under the twin moons. Darien parked the crawler under the camo awning and gently lifted the fiend woman into his arms. She murmured something in her native tongue as he carried her inside, her head rolling weakly against his chest. Inside, the recycled air felt cooler, cleaner. Darien laid her carefully on his bed, the only bed in the station, and covered her with a thermal blanket. Eli hovered beside them, his large eyes never blinking. "She's stable," Darien said after a quick scan. "Whatever they gave her is wearing off. She just needs rest." Eli nodded, then curled up in a pile of blankets in the corner without a word. Darien stood watch for the next hour, rifle within reach, eyes on the sensors. The station was secure. No heat signatures within 50 clicks. But he kept checking anyway. Just before dawn, she stirred. Her breathing deepened. Her limbs flexed. Then, slowly, her eyes opened, luminous violet with vertical pupils. She blinked against the light, her gaze settling on the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Darien stepped into view. "You're safe now," he said softly. Her eyes found his, and for a moment she didn't move. Then she sat up slowly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. Eli was there in an instant, springing to her side. "Mother," he whispered. She embraced him with both arms, purring faintly as she buried her face in his fur. "Eli, you're safe," she said in a voice like warm sand, still hoarse from sedation. "You found help." Her eyes rose to Darien. "You brought him to me." Darien nodded. "Name's Darien Holt. You're lucky he found me." Her gaze didn't waver. "I am Nira." The name lingered in the air between them, Nira. Darien gave a short nod. Nira, he repeated, tasting the unfamiliar shape of it. Glad you're awake. She sat upright now, keeping one arm wrapped protectively around Eli, who had settled against her with the fierce possessiveness only a child could muster. Her violet eyes scanned the room, lingering on the exposed weapons rack, the half-eaten ration on the table, and the desert deer piled in the corner. This is your den? She asked slowly, her voice still strained but strengthening. Yeah. Remote outpost, self-sustaining. He shrugged. Wasn't expecting guests. She gave a faint smile, barely a twitch of her lips, but it was there. Neither were we. Eli looked between them, then reached out and touched Darien's wrist. He saved me first, he said, translator still clipped to his collar. Then came for you. Nira turned to Darien fully now, her expression unreadable. Why? You didn't know us. He exhaled, ran a hand through his sweat-matted hair. Because I've seen enough people die who didn't deserve it. Thought maybe it was time I stopped watching. Her ears twitched at that. She studied him a moment longer, then gently set Eli aside and rose to her feet. Her posture was still slightly unsteady, but there was strength returning with every breath. Her frame was tall, almost equal to Darien's, with a sleek musculature visible beneath her travel-worn tunic. She moved with the smooth, controlled grace of a predator. Your son's brave, Darien said quietly. Most adults wouldn't cross that much desert. He did it alone. She looked down at Eli, pride softening her angular features. His father was a pathfinder. Taught us both how to survive. Darien tilted his head. What happened to him? Nira's tail lowered, her ears folding slightly. Captured. Killed. Same ones who took me. The Syrixians. Yes. They trade in lives. Yeah, I know. His jaw tightened. I've fought them before. Never thought I'd see them again way out here. She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his as she passed. You could have turned us away. You didn't. I'm not that far gone, he muttered. Far gone? He hesitated. I came out here to disappear, Nira. To get away from war. People. All of it. Her eyes searched his. And now? Darien swallowed, glancing between her and the boy now dozing on the floor. Now I'm wondering if I built this place too well. Because I don't think I'm alone anymore. A quiet moment passed. Then Nira stepped closer again, her voice barely above a whisper. Among my people, she said, a life saved binds us. Not by debt. By choice. She reached up slowly, brushing her cheek against his in a gesture of her culture, intimate, not demanding. A soft purr vibrated from her throat, low and warm. Darien stood frozen, surprised but not resistant. When she pulled back, she offered him something between a nod and a bow. Thank you, she said. Over the next 2 days, Nira regained her strength with startling speed. Her body, lean and efficient, healed faster than any human Darien had ever seen, even without the military-grade stimulants he still had stashed away. She spent most of her time in silence, watching, learning. She observed how Darien managed the recycler, how he maintained the perimeter drones, and how he rationed food supplies. She never intruded, just absorbed it all, quiet and calculating. Eli, on the other hand, had fully settled in. He followed Darien like a shadow, peppering him with soft-spoken questions about weapons, about machines, about human things. You're not as loud as I expected humans to be, Eli noted one afternoon, watching Darien clean his pulse rifle. Darien smirked. You haven't seen me during maintenance day. Eli tilted his head. You are alone by choice? Was. Darien glanced toward the small control room where Nira was adjusting the solar regulator settings. Things change. Later that evening, as the desert cooled and the suns dipped low, Nira joined him on the station's rooftop observation panel. The sky had turned a deep orange-gray, dotted with distant stars and the glow of the binary moons. Darien handed her a steaming mug of water steeped with dried herbs he'd grown. She sniffed it cautiously, then took a small sip. Not poison, he joked. She smiled faintly. Tastes like dust and metal. Exactly how I like it. They sat in silence for a while. Eventually Nira spoke. They'll come back. Darien didn't need clarification. The Syrixians? She nodded. They don't take failure lightly. And now they know I'm alive. That Eli is. They'll send others. Stronger. Maybe even him. Darien raised a brow. Him? Vorlax. The collector who took my people. She traced a symbol in the dust on the railing. He deals in rarity. Fiend are nearly extinct. We're worth a fortune. How many of your people are left? She looked up, the glow of the moons reflecting in her eyes. Fewer than 500 scattered across the sector. Most in hiding. Some already taken. I thought we were far enough out to be safe. Darien leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I can help you relocate. Find somewhere new, more secure. Somewhere they can't reach. No. Her voice was soft, but unshakable. Running didn't work. They'll keep coming. I won't spend my life fleeing. Not with Eli. Darien studied her, then nodded slowly. Then we make a stand. She looked at him sharply. We? He didn't flinch. You're not the only one tired of running. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat, something passed between them, shared defiance, quiet understanding. Then, on the horizon, a flicker. Darien stood. Motion sensor tripped. Nira was up beside him instantly. Together, they turned to face the night. Darien dropped down from the roof hatch and landed with a thud in the station's main hallway, already heading for the command console. Nira followed silently behind him, her tail flicking in tight, agitated arcs. The proximity alarm pulsed in steady red. He brought up the holographic feed and zoomed in. One heat signature. Large. Slow-moving. Eli padded into the room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. What is it? Too far to tell. Darien muttered, adjusting the focus. Whatever it is, it's headed this way. Nira moved beside him and studied the grainy image. Wrong posture for Syrixian. Too bulky. Darien tapped the console. Activating perimeter drones. Outside, 4 spindly tripod drones activated, their lights blinking as they fanned out in a half-circle facing the encroaching target. The nearest one sent back a clearer image. It was a creature. Massive. Quadruped. Covered in thick, spiked carapace like living armor. Desert crawler. Nira muttered, tension leaving her shoulders. Scavenger species. Smells heat. Probably drawn to the recycler's outflow. Darien raised a brow. You sure? She nodded. It won't attack unless provoked. I've hunted them. Of course you have. He gave her a sideways glance. You planning to eat it? She didn't smile, but her ears twitched. It's tough. Makes decent stew. He let out a low chuckle. That's a hell of a first date idea. Nira blinked, confused. Date? Never mind, he said quickly, flicking off the alarm. We'll let the drones scare it off. Once the crawler had lumbered away, Darien slumped back in the chair, letting out a slow breath. Eli climbed up beside him and pointed to the map overlay. If that thing wandered in, others might too. Darien nodded. We're too exposed. He turned to Nira. If we're staying, we'll need more than drones and walls. I've got the hardware, but it's gonna take time. I'll help, she said. We can't wait for another attack to find us unprepared. You ever do sentry grid programming? Nira tilted her head. No. But I can learn. Darien looked between her and Eli, then nodded. We start at sunrise. That night, sleep came late. Darien lay on his narrow bunk while Nira rested across from him on a folded pad of blankets, her breathing slow and even. But neither of them was really asleep. In the silence between them, something was forming. Not just trust. Not just survival. something else. Something they hadn't had in years. Hope. The next morning, the twin suns of Arkan's Reach rose behind a thin veil of dust, painting the sky in hues of copper and blood orange. Darien was already up, sleeves rolled, sweat beading across his brow as he pried open an old weapons crate beneath the floor panels. Inside were the tools of a life he tried to bury: ion charges, targeting beacons, foldable turret legs, and 3 autonomous defense AI cores, still dormant but fully functional. Nira crouched beside him, tail flicking with curiosity. All this was here, beneath your floor? Most people bury regrets. I buried artillery. She gave a small sound, almost a purr, though more amused than affectionate. Then let's dig it up. They worked tirelessly for hours. Darien calibrated the drones and sensors while Nira set up motion-triggered tripwires, traps, and fallback barriers. Eli joined them eagerly, scuttling into access panels and rewiring dormant circuits. At one point, he even bypassed the failsafe Darien had long assumed broken. Where the hell did you learn that? Darien asked, watching the console spark to life. Eli shrugged. Father taught me. Fiend travel light. Defend fast. Darien grunted in approval. Remind me not to underestimate either of you. By midday, the station's perimeter had tripled in sensitivity. Turrets were mounted atop the rocky outcroppings surrounding the station. Sensor nets were woven into the terrain. Any unauthorized ship entering their airspace would trigger an alert. Darien also dug out a military-grade satellite uplink, old, dusty, but still intact. Nira stood beside him as he wired it to a signal booster. What's that for? He hesitated. Insurance. If things get bad, I can ping the Terran Border Patrol. Might take days, but someone will hear it. Would they come? Darien stared at the blinking light for a long moment. If I send that signal, someone will. She nodded, stepping back to help Eli reinforce the blast shutters. The silence between them was filled with purpose. There was no more pretending that their lives weren't intertwined. Late that evening, when the work was done and the systems hummed in quiet readiness, they gathered around the small table in the main cabin. The meal was simple: roasted roots from Nira's garden plot, and a protein slab Eli had diced into decorative shapes. For the first time since their arrival, they felt like something more than just survivors. They felt like a family. Darien raised a cup of recycled water. To not dying, he said. Nira tilted her head. That's a human toast? It's an honest one. She clinked her cup gently against his. Then to not dying. Eli raised his, too. And to fighting back. The next 2 days passed in a blur of upgrades and anticipation. Every hour without a new threat felt like a borrowed one. Darien ran combat drills with Nira in the dry canyon just west of the station. She was a natural. Her movements were fluid and efficient, every step silent, every strike calculated. When she wielded the curved blade Darien had offered her, it was like watching a dance meant to kill. Your form's precise, he commented as she finished disarming the last drone dummy with a spin and downward strike. Nira's chest rose and fell with exertion, her purring faint. I was a huntress. Before everything. Before the Syrixians? She nodded, wiping her brow. Before the fall. My clan protected others. I've always fought. Darien handed her a water flask. Their fingers brushed, and the jolt between them was as sharp as ever. He cleared his throat and stepped back. Let's take a break. Meanwhile, Eli had completely taken over the command console inside. Darien had given him partial clearance codes, and the kid was already running diagnostics, surveillance sweeps, and minor reroutes with more finesse than most rookies he'd served with. The quiet afternoon was shattered when the outer motion array began to chime, not in alarm, but in alert. Contact, Eli called. High altitude, north vector. Small vessel. Not Syrixian pattern. Darien and Nira rushed inside. Darien narrowed his eyes at the readout. That's a Terran scout ship. Nira stiffened. Yours? He nodded. Yeah, But they're not supposed to be here unless I send a distress. He stopped mid-sentence. The satellite uplink. He turned to Eli. Did you activate the beacon? The boy shook his head. Darien cursed. Then someone else did. Nira looked concerned. Could it be a friend? Darien didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his rifle and toggled the external mic. Unidentified Terran scout, state your call sign and reason for approach. There was a pause. Then static crackled before a familiar voice came through. Darien Holt, this is Commander Elon Vire of the TDF Aegis. We're responding to a flag signal sent from your station's coordinates. Open your doors. Darien's expression darkened. I didn't request backup. Nira's ears folded slightly. Can we trust them? He hesitated. Vire's a soldier. He follows orders. If someone wants us extracted, he'll follow through. Whether we agree or not. Nira glanced at Eli. We don't want extraction. Darien looked at the growing dot on the radar. Then we better make that real clear. The Terran scout vessel descended slowly, its hull catching the waning light of the second sun. Sleek and utilitarian, the kind of ship meant for precision missions, not rescue, not war. Darien stood at the station's reinforced entrance, rifle slung across his chest, his posture rigid. Nira stood to his left, her blade sheathed but ready, and Eli to his right, arms folded, tail twitching behind him in short, sharp movements. The ship touched down with a hiss of venting coolant, and the ramp extended. 3 figures emerged. The lead was unmistakably Elon Vire, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cut silvering hair and a face like a chiseled stone wall. 2 soldiers flanked him, armed but weapons holstered. Vire stopped a few feet from Darien, nodded once. Lieutenant Holt. Darien didn't return the gesture. I haven't been a lieutenant in years. And yet here you are, running tactical ops on the frontier like it's 2311. Vire glanced past him, eyes briefly landing on Nira and Eli. You've been busy. Darien kept his voice level. This is a private outpost. What do you want? Vire reached into his jacket and pulled out a datapad. We intercepted a spike on a restricted frequency. A signal from this location went out 4 days ago. Emergency level ping. Darien frowned. No one in this station sent that signal. No? Vire tapped a few commands. The ping originated from your uplink, with your clearance codes. Darien's blood chilled. He looked at Eli. The child's ears flattened. I didn't, Eli said quickly. I swear. I believe you, Darien muttered. Then he looked to Nira. Someone accessed it remotely. Someone wants them found. Vire was watching the exchange carefully. You want to tell me who they are? They're under my protection, Darien said simply. Vire's expression didn't change. Darien, I'm under orders. The Council has eyes on this region again after Varnak's rebellion. If there's anything delicate involving unregistered species or anti-Terran factions, they want it cleaned up before it causes diplomatic strain. Darien stepped forward. She's not a threat. Neither is her son. What they are is hunted. By Syrixian collectors. I stopped one already. Nira's voice cut through the tension. They'll come again. If you care about diplomatic stability, let us prepare. Vire turned to her fully. For a moment, he seemed to study her, not with suspicion, but curiosity. Then he sighed. Look, I don't have authority to detain anyone. Yet. But the Council's going to want answers. They'll get answers, Darien said. But on our terms. Vire paused. You always did know how to make things difficult. And you always showed up late. Vire actually smiled at that. You've got 48 hours before I have to report back. Make the time count. He turned and walked back to his ship. When the scout lifted off minutes later, Darien stood in silence, watching it disappear into the violet-tinged sky. Nira stepped closer. What now? Darien's expression darkened. Now we finish what we started. Because someone just put a target on our backs. The moment the scout ship disappeared into the stratosphere, the mood inside the station shifted. Darien closed and sealed the entry hatch, then turned back to Nira and Eli. We have 2 days. Maybe less. Someone accessed my uplink. Which means someone's tracking us, or trying to flush us out. Nira crossed her arms, ears angled sharply. Syrixians? Darien shook his head. Too crude. They don't play games with Terran satellites. No, this was precise. Coordinated. Probably Lord Vorlax himself, trying to bait the Council into revealing our location so he can swoop in later and claim it was an accident. Nira hissed quietly. Cowards hiding behind politics. Darien turned toward the console. We can't stop the Council from watching, but we can make damn sure no one gets a clean shot at us. He pulled up the topographic schematics of the surrounding terrain. We're building fallback positions. If the station falls, we retreat into the ravines to the west. There's natural cover, and I've got an old calm tower there we can reactivate as a last resort. Eli leaned over the console, tail flicking. I'll wire the tower. Set traps. Good, Darien said. I'll show you the panel locks later. Nira, I'll need you to teach me the snare patterns you used near the ridge. I want every approach laced with hurt. Nira nodded, eyes narrowing with purpose. I'll get started on the west trail. It's the weakest point. They scattered like a squad prepping for siege. By nightfall, the station was transformed into a fortress of shadow and wire. Motion-triggered grav nets lined the front dunes. Blast charges were buried under the camouflage netting. Even the old solar panel mountings had been repurposed as concealment for small auto turrets. Inside, Darien checked and double-checked every system. He kept one eye on the proximity sensors and the other on Eli, who had his arms buried in a bundle of scorched cables, whistling a low alien tune as he worked. I'm going to owe you a toolbox when this is over, Darien muttered. Eli grinned without looking up. Or a ship. Let's not push it. In the main corridor, Nira returned, her tunic dusty and fur matted from crawling through rock and brush. She dropped a coil of thorned wire beside the weapons crate. Every path west of the station now bites. Darien tossed her a ration bar. Remind me never to piss you off. She caught it, then leaned against the wall beside him. We're ready. As ready as we'll ever be. They stood together in silence, the weight of the moment between them. Darien broke it first. Do your people really mate for life? Nira turned her head slowly, eyes gleaming. We bond once. Deeply. Forever. Darien swallowed hard. And what happens if that bond forms, unexpectedly? Her voice was quiet but certain. Then it's fate. He didn't have an answer. Not right away. But he reached out. Took her hand in his. And for the first time since the desert took him in, Darien Holt didn't feel alone. The next day broke with no warning. No alarms. No rumbling ships on the horizon. Just a ripple in the sky, a shimmer that barely distorted the upper atmosphere. Darien stood atop the observation deck, rifle across his back, staring through magnification lenses at the anomaly. What is it? Nira asked, stepping up beside him. He adjusted the focus. Cloaking distortion. Someone's masking their approach. And doing a damn good job of it. A heartbeat later, the console below pinged, an urgent triple chime. Unauthorized landing detected. Sector Delta 5. Darien turned and shouted. Eli. The boy bolted from the maintenance room, already reading the alert on his handheld. One ship. Heavy class. Not Terran. Darien's gut twisted. Syrixian? Eli frowned. No. Worse. Draconian. Nira's entire body went rigid. Vorlax. Darien's voice dropped. They're early. Nira hissed through her teeth, a sound full of fury and fear. He must have been close. Waiting. The council ping flushed us out. Darien didn't hesitate. We stick to the fallback plan. West Trail. Defense nets active. Nira, go with Eli. Guide him to the canyon shelter. No, she snapped, turning to him. I stay. We fight. He grabbed her arm. Listen to me. If this goes sideways, Eli needs one of us with him. You're faster. Stronger. You'll get him out. Her expression twisted. Conflicted, but slowly nodding. You better survive this. I don't plan on dying today. Darien hit the manual lock, sealing the station's interior behind Nira and Eli as they bolted toward the western ravine. He took his place at the main defense post, activating turrets, arming charges, aligning the AI target systems. Then he waited. The ground trembled minutes later. From beyond the dunes, a massive silhouette broke through the shimmer, a carrier-class warship, matte black, its surface bristling with ports and emitters. A loading ramp extended. From it descended dozens of draconian soldiers, armored head to toe, their reptilian faces concealed behind visor masks etched in gold. Darien's blood ran cold. At their center, emerging like a serpent from shadow, came Lord Vorlax, tall, scaled, cloaked in flowing crimson robes, eyes like burning coals. He lifted a clawed hand. The soldiers halted. He spoke in a voice that boomed across the canyon, filtered through a voice amplifier. Darien Holt. Return to your quarters. Surrender the fugitives. And you will be spared. Darien raised his rifle and toggled the loudspeaker. Vorlax, you picked the wrong desert. And with that, he pulled the trigger. The first turret roared to life. The Battle of Arkan's Reach had begun. The desert erupted. Turrets hidden beneath sandblasted panels spun into motion, spitting blue plasma into the draconian vanguard. 3 reptilian soldiers dropped instantly, their armor smoldering where the bolts pierced clean through. The rest fanned out with chilling coordination, trained, disciplined, unfazed by casualties. Darien ducked behind a reinforced barricade, snapped off 2 more shots, then activated the secondary defense net. Electromines triggered across the dunes with sharp crackles, throwing another squad into the air like rag dolls. But Vorlax's forces kept coming. Inside the command room, automated systems tracked targets and rerouted power. The AI cores began recalibrating fire patterns, and the station's outer shell glowed faintly as the kinetic shields absorbed incoming blasts. Darien gritted his teeth as a shockwave from a rail round shook the structure. They'd brought heavy artillery. He adjusted his aim and squeezed the trigger. A draconian gunner fell, twitching violently. But it wasn't enough. Through the scope, he saw Vorlax calmly walking behind his troops, untouched, giving commands through hand gestures. He wasn't fighting, he was watching. Studying. Testing. They were probing defenses. Trying to find the weak points. Back at the canyon shelter, Nira and Eli moved with purpose. The ravine had natural choke points, and Nira had already set up perimeter traps, wire snares, pressure spikes, sonic detonators that could rupture internal organs if tripped. Eli worked silently, his hands steady as he wired a thermal relay to a false transmitter, something Darien had taught him to mimic a power signal. They'll track it, Eli whispered. Think we're holed up here? Nira nodded. Good. When they strike empty air, they'll learn we bite. Above them, a distant explosion echoed. The station was under siege. I should go back, Nira said, rising. He needs help. Eli grabbed her wrist. No. He told you to stay. I know. Her voice cracked. But if he dies, he won't. The words came from such a small voice, yet full of steel. Back at the station, Darien was beginning to tire. His shoulder ached from recoil, and the heat in the air was oppressive. 2 of the turrets had gone dark. One flank was exposed. He ducked just in time as a plasma bolt vaporized the railing behind him. He activated the emergency speaker. Nira. Status. Her voice came in low, focused. Canyon secured. Decoys active. Eli's with me. Good. I'm about to lure them closer. Be ready for a counter-strike. Darien, she said softly, her tone shifting. Be careful. He smiled, despite the blood on his knuckles. That's the plan. He stood, sprinted to the console, and keyed in the fallback protocol. The outer turrets powered down, intentionally. To Vorlax's troops, it would look like a critical failure. Darien switched to heat vision and watched them surge forward. "Come on, you bastards!" he growled. "Take the bait." As expected, the draconian forces surged forward the moment the perimeter turrets went dark. Like predators sensing wounded prey, they advanced in tight squads, plasma rifles raised, their boots pounding into the scorched sand. Darien retreated into the station, locking the side corridors behind him and herding the attackers into a narrow central hall, one that had been deliberately reinforced and rigged. The moment the first wave crossed the threshold, he detonated the ceiling charges. A roar of fire and stones swallowed the forward unit. The hall caved in, burying them in rubble and shrapnel. Screams echoed through the smoke. Darien didn't pause. He moved fast and brutal, clearing the rear with precise shots, targeting knees, throats, joints, any weakness in the draconian armor. He was bleeding now, a jagged tear across his left arm from a glancing bolt, but adrenaline kept him upright. And then silence. He checked the readouts. The station's main floor was empty. The last squad had fallen. But the system was still tracking movement. One heat signature. Larger than the rest. Vorlax. Darien turned slowly toward the west-facing corridor just as the outer wall groaned and buckled. The metal warped inward like foil under pressure. And then, with terrifying ease, it exploded. A crimson blur moved through the smoke. Darien raised his rifle and fired. The bolt connected, but bounced. Vorlax emerged, cloak swirling, eyes burning with triumph. "You've been an irritating thorn, human. Glad I left an impression." Darien stepped back, gripping his rifle tighter. "This ends now." "Yes," Vorlax purred. "With your death." The draconian noble moved like lightning, slashing through the air with a gleaming energy blade. Darien barely blocked the first swing, the impact nearly tearing the rifle from his hands. He ducked under a second strike, drew his sidearm, and fired twice at close range. One round hit Vorlax's shoulder, staggering him. The second ricocheted. Vorlax hissed in rage, lunged forward, and drove a knee into Darien's ribs, slamming him against the wall. Darien coughed blood. "You hit like a jealous ex." Vorlax grabbed him by the throat, lifting him with one arm. "Where is she?" he snarled. "The fiend. I will have her. I will have all of them." Darien's hand fumbled for his belt. Found the flash charge. "Go to hell," he whispered. He slammed the charge into Vorlax's chest. White-hot light exploded between them. Vorlax screamed, stumbling back, clawing at his eyes. Darien fell to the floor, coughing, scrambling for his weapon. Behind them, the station's roof shook. Dust and sand poured from the seams. Darien looked up. Reinforcements were coming, too many for him to hold alone. "Time to go," he muttered. He activated the final lockdown sequence and sprinted for the exit tunnel, just as the main blast door began to close behind him. He didn't look back. The station would fall. But it had served its purpose. Darien burst from the hidden tunnel exit a kilometer west of the station, lungs heaving, sweat dripping down his soot-streaked face. Behind him, Arkan's Reach burned, columns of black smoke curling into the sky as the last remnants of the station collapsed in on itself. The detonation of the fusion core was controlled, enough to destroy the remaining systems and prevent Vorlax from salvaging anything useful, but not enough to glass the surrounding terrain. Just enough to make a point. He staggered down the slope into the canyon, clutching his side where a cracked rib sent a fresh jolt of pain through his chest. Nira was the first to reach him. She caught him under one arm, steadying him. "You're hurt." Darien gave a breathless grin. "Just a few souvenirs." Eli ran up next, wide-eyed. "You made it. I saw the fire. Thought." Darien reached down and ruffled the boy's hair. "Still breathing, kid?" Nira helped him to the cave shelter, where they'd stashed backup gear, basic rations, med packs, and a long-range emergency beacon. Darien slumped onto a crate while she peeled back his shirt and began cleaning the wound. "You bought us time," she said. "Not enough," Darien replied, wincing as she applied salve to the gash across his ribs. "Vorlax is still out there. And he won't stop until he has you." She paused. "Then we don't wait for him to find us." Darien looked at her. "You suggesting we go on offense?" Nira's eyes gleamed. "You said you had a comm tower? If we can broadcast, we can expose him," Darien finished. "Force the Council's hand." Eli pulled up a portable display and sketched a crude diagram of the ridge. "Tower's here. If we route the signal through the old Vanguard relay, it'll bounce straight into the Terran diplomatic net." Darien nodded. "Only problem is, we'll have to hold that tower long enough to finish the upload. Vorlax won't ignore a signal like that. He'll come to shut us down. Then we hold it," Nira said. "Together." Darien met her gaze. Her determination was fire. Her loyalty unshakable. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "We finish this. No more running. No more hiding." Eli grinned. "Let's go ruin his day." The three of them moved quickly, gathering the last of their equipment. The canyon wind howled above them, carrying the scent of scorched metal and ozone. War was coming. But so was justice. And this time, they'd bring the fight to Vorlax. The climb to the tower took most of the night. The ridge loomed over the horizon like a jagged spine, the crumbled ruins of an old Vanguard comm relay silhouetted against the twin moons. Once, it had transmitted orders to entire fleets. Now it was little more than rust and stone. But it would be enough. Darien reached the summit first, his breathing ragged, shoulders still bound in a pressure wrap. He dropped his gear beside the access terminal, then looked out over the desert one last time. Nira crested the ridge behind him, her violet eyes shining in the moonlight. Her blade was slung across her back, and her fur was streaked with dust, but she moved with purpose. Eli followed, dragging a stripped power cell and a tangle of cables twice his size. "I'll get the transmitter online," he said. "You two hold the line." Darien and Nira exchanged a look. No words were needed. They moved quickly, setting up the portable generator, aligning the dish, and powering the central column. The ancient terminal flared to life, flickering but functional. "Signal strength?" Darien called. 94%, Eli replied. "But we'll need a clean broadcast window." "No interference, or the relay drops." Darien nodded. "How long to send the packet?" 3 minutes. Nira unslung her blade, checking its edge. "That's generous." They were interrupted by the telltale hum of incoming repulsors. A shadow fell over the ridge. Vorlax's ship, sleeker, smaller than before, but faster, descended like a vulture. Darien lifted his rifle. "We've got company." Draconian soldiers began dropping from the ship in staggered units, 12 at first, then 20. They moved with purpose, fanning out across the lower ridge trails, weapons drawn. "Eli, start the upload," Darien said. "Nira, north flank." She nodded and disappeared into the rocks without another word. The first shots cracked the silence moments later. Darien ducked behind a crumbled pillar, picking off 2 advancing soldiers with precise bursts. He could hear Nira's snarls from the other side, her blade singing through the air, followed by thuds and reptilian screams. A bolt scorched the rock inches from his head. Darien pivoted and returned fire, dropping another attacker. At the terminal, Eli's voice came through the comms. 2 minutes. They're trying to jam the signal. Darien gritted his teeth. "Not today!" More draconians swarmed up the path. The ridge was swarming. Then Nira appeared, blood on her fur, eyes blazing. She sprinted past him, slamming a plasma mine into the central trail and diving aside as it exploded, hurling bodies and dust skyward. They were outnumbered. Outgunned. But not outmatched. Not yet. Darien's shoulder was screaming now, every recoil sent sharp pain down his spine, but he didn't stop firing. A draconian lieutenant broke through the smoke at 10 meters, swinging a serrated blade. Darien sidestepped, jammed the muzzle of his rifle into the alien's gut, and pulled the trigger. The soldier dropped in a heap. Darien turned just in time to see Nira slam a spiked trap into the earth, then flip over a boulder as plasma bolts shredded the air behind her. Her movements were savage and beautiful, a blur of violet fur, blade, and instinct. "Status?" he called out between bursts. Eli's voice crackled in his ear. "Signal at 75%. They're flooding the spectrum with counter pulses. I need another 90 seconds. Nira landed beside Darien, breathing hard. Her tunic was torn across the shoulder, a burn trailing down her side. "They're regrouping at the east rise." Darien scanned the horizon and cursed. "They're preparing a charge." He looked to the ancient comm tower, still buzzing, still flickering. It was so close. Then he saw it. A small detachment, 5 soldiers, flanking toward the tower's base, weapons drawn, ignoring Darien and Nira entirely. They were going for Eli. "Eli, move!" Darien shouted. Too late. Plasma fire erupted around the boy as he ducked behind the transmitter column, his tiny hands still frantically tapping commands. "Almost there!" Nira's eyes narrowed. "I'll cover him." "No!" But she was already moving, sprinting through the smoke. Darien turned and laid down a wall of fire to cover her approach, every shot aimed at slowing the advancing squad. Nira reached the terminal and dove in front of Eli, blade drawn, intercepting the first attacker mid-leap. They clashed with a metallic scream. Darien saw the blur of claws and fangs as Nira tore through them, but one soldier got close, too close. A plasma bayonet slashed across her side. She didn't cry out. She just turned and buried her blade in the attacker's throat. Darien ran, gun blazing, until he reached the terminal. "Eli?" The boy didn't look up. 10 seconds! Nira collapsed to one knee beside the column, clutching her side. Blood ran down her fur, soaking the sand beneath her. Darien dropped to her side. "Stay with me." She grinned faintly. "I'm not leaving yet." "Upload complete," Eli shouted. "Signals bouncing now. Everyone with a satellite ear from here to Mars is getting a full data dump on Vorlax's operation." Darien sagged in relief. "Then we won." But the moment was short-lived. Above them, Vorlax's ship loomed again. This time, it didn't descend. It powered weapons. "He's going to glass the ridge," Darien muttered. "He doesn't care who's left down here." Eli's voice trembled. "What do we do?" Darien looked at the cratered ground, the fading lights of the tower, the wounded woman at his side, and the terrified child clutching a broken data pad. And he made a decision. "We hold." Darien yanked a power cell from the remains of his scorched rifle and jammed it into the tower's override port. The system flared, stuttered, then pulsed with new life. "Eli," he said sharply, "get under the base shield canopy. Now." The boy hesitated only a second before obeying, diving under the small arch-shaped panel at the back of the tower where a short-range deflector had been jury-rigged from scavenged Terran components. It wasn't designed for battle, more like a flare shelter, but it was better than nothing. Nira leaned heavily against the terminal, blood streaking down her side, still gripping her blade like she'd died before letting go of it. Darien knelt beside her, pressing a med patch to her wound. "You're not dying on me now." She gave him a weak smile. "You gave your solitude from me. I won't give you your silence back so easily." Above them, the ship's cannons began to glow. Red-hot coils of energy wound tighter and tighter, aiming straight for the tower. Darien pulled Nira under the canopy just as the first blast struck. The ground shook violently. Rock split. Flame roared. A searing white explosion consumed the upper ridge. The tower's shield flared to full intensity, sparking and screeching under the impact, but it held. Barely. Eli screamed from under the console. "Second blast incoming!" Darien wrapped both arms around Nira and Eli and braced. This is gonna hurt. The second blast hit harder, like a god had punched the planet. The tower's shield sputtered, overloaded, then collapsed. Dust and fire rained down around them. Debris clanged off the twisted steel frame overhead. But the core of the tower, though blackened and bent, still stood. The signal still pulsed, repeating the broadcast. Over and over again. Unstoppable. Indelible. And that's when they heard it. A second roar, not from Vorlax's ship, but from the sky above it. Engines. Fast. Heavy. Multiple signatures. Darien shoved off the wreckage and looked up. 3 Terran warships burst from the clouds, sleek, angular cruisers bearing the white and silver seal of the Galactic Council. One of them opened comms immediately. "This is Council Ship Vanguard's oath. Lord Vorlax, you are ordered to stand down. You are in violation of no less than 16 interspecies treaties." Darien laughed, sharp and cracked. "Took you long enough." Nira reached for his hand. "They heard us." The Draconian ship jerked in retreat. Its engines fired, peeling it away from the ridge in full burn. Council cruisers gave chase, disappearing beyond the horizon. And then silence. Except for the signal. Still pulsing. Still shining truth into the dark corners of the galaxy. For several minutes, none of them moved. Darien lay half-sprawled under twisted steel, one arm wrapped around Eli, the other still gripping Nira's blood-slick hand. The 3 of them sat in a cocoon of wreckage and scorched rock, the only sound the fading echo of orbital engines and the hum of a fried transmitter still courageously clicking through its final loop. "We're alive," Eli whispered, barely daring to believe it. "Barely," Darien muttered, shifting his aching body. "I think my bones have bruises." Nira smiled faintly through the blood and dust, her ears twitching. "But we held." He turned his head toward her. Her fur was matted, her blade arm trembling with exhaustion, but her eyes were fierce and bright. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Hurts like fire. But I've hurt worse." Darien shifted and helped her sit upright, glancing at the half-crumbled ridge they now occupied. What had once been Arkan's reach was now a scar in the desert, a symbol of resistance scorched into the rock. Council ships still circled overhead, scanning the wreckage and the horizon for fleeing Draconian vessels. One of them, a sleek black and gold diplomatic corvette, descended slowly toward the ridge. Darien stood, cracked his neck, and offered a hand to Nira. She took it. Eli climbed out from under the console and stood between them. A council delegation emerged from the landing ramp. At their head was a tall human woman in formal diplomatic robes, flanked by 2 armored peacekeepers and a medic. "Darien Holt?" she called. "Nira of the Fiend? And Eli?" She glanced at the child and smiled with careful respect. "That's us," Darien replied, raising one tired hand. "You here to clean up the mess?" "I'm here," she said firmly. "To acknowledge it publicly." She stepped forward, extending a hand. "Ambassador Relisfin, Council Directorate of Interspecies Protection. We received your broadcast. All of it. Lord Vorlax's crimes. The intercepted trades. The smuggled genetics. The names of buyers. It's enough to trigger full sanctions across Draconian space." Darien didn't shake her hand right away. "And what about the Fiend?" Relis turned to Nira. "Your people are no longer fugitives. You are now a protected species under galactic law. You'll be granted asylum, recognition, and diplomatic standing. That begins today." Nira blinked slowly, her body swaying. "You mean, we can go home?" Relis hesitated. "If you still have one." Nira's grip on Darien's hand tightened. "We'll make one," Darien said. "Together." Relis studied them for a moment, then nodded. "There's land. A world in Sector 17 Kappa. Council jurisdiction. Fertile, quiet, and unclaimed. You'll have full autonomy if you want it." Darien looked at Nira. She was already looking at him. "I think we've had enough solitude," she said softly. "It's time to build." Eli grinned up at them both. Can we call it a sanctuary? Darien smiled. Yeah, kid. We can. 6 months later, the planet known as Kalen's refuge bloomed under twin suns. Rolling fields of sapphire grass swayed in soft winds. Irrigation channels wove between rich black soil. The skeletal frames of new buildings rose from the fertile valleys, domes, towers, workshops, greenhouses, designed by many hands, built by many species. Not just Fiend, but also Lamari, Yalari, Garuin, and even a few brave draconian defectors who had turned against the trade. Refugees from every edge of the galaxy now called it home. And at the center of it all stood the sanctuary's founders. Darien Holt leaned against the porch railing of the central command dome, now converted into a council chamber and schoolhouse. He wore a sleeveless shirt, scars visible and sun-warmed, a data pad in one hand and a coffee mug in the other. Below, Eli sprinted through the grass with a dozen other kids of mixed species, teaching them how to set up a basic perimeter sensor using repurposed drone tech. And across the field, Nira knelt in a garden bed, her indigo fur dusted with pollen, tails swaying as she checked the soil moisture levels. She turned toward him, caught his eye, and smiled in a way that made his chest tighten even after all this time. She crossed the field and joined him on the porch. The Nirelians want a bigger greenhouse, she said, taking his mug and sipping. Apparently your earth tomatoes are addictive. He snorted. Tell them to stop hoarding the cucumbers and we'll talk. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun rise. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder and said quietly, We did it. Darien wrapped his arm around her. Yeah. We really did. There had been challenges, bounty hunters, supply shortages, cultural tension, but nothing that the people here couldn't face together. With the protection of the council and the leadership of those who had bled for this place, the sanctuary was thriving. And it was still growing. More ships arrived weekly, more broken families, more outcasts. All of them carrying stories. All of them needing a home. Darien no longer dreamed of solitude. He dreamed of walls built to protect others, not keep them out. He dreamed of Eli's laugh. Of Nira's hand in his. Of sunrises like this. In the end, it hadn't been war, or vengeance, or power that changed the galaxy. It had been kindness. A bowl of food. An open door. A soldier who made one small decision not to look away. And that was enough to start a revolution.